Hello everyone, and welcome back to Lost Relationship Chronicles. I'm Aaron, and for the past 17 years, I've been married to Kayla. We share a 16-year-old daughter, Judy. My days are spent working as a mechanical engineer at our local automotive plant, where I keep machinery running and ensure production flows smoothly. It was a bright, warm March afternoon when my phone started buzzing in my pocket. After cleaning the oil from my hands, I checked the caller ID. Gordon, my next-door neighbor. This was unusual since he never contacted me during my work shift. I answered the call, and Gordon's voice came through urgent and panicked. "Aaron, you've got to come home immediately." My stomach dropped. "What's happening?" "There's a moving truck parked outside your place. Some men are carrying furniture out of your house." I gripped the phone tighter. "What? Who are they?" "I'm not sure, but they're removing a lot of your belongings. Your wife is out there with them, too. I thought you needed to know." "Kayla?" My heart started racing. "Are you certain about this?" "Absolutely. You need to get here quickly." I didn't hesitate for another moment. Shoving my phone away, I rushed. Across the factory floor, my work boots echoing against the concrete as my mind spun with possibilities. Was this a robbery happening in broad daylight, or something even worse? I burst into my supervisor's office without knocking. "Sir, I have to leave immediately." My boss, a tough but fair man, looked up from his documents. "What's the situation?" "Someone's burglarizing my home. My neighbor just called. They're loading my possessions into a moving vehicle." His eyes went wide. "Go now." Without waiting for another word, I spun around and sprinted to the parking lot, my heart pounding against my chest. I fumbled with my car keys, threw myself into the driver's seat, and fired up the engine. The tires squealed as I peeled out of the lot, gripping the steering wheel like my life depended on it. I had no clue what awaited me at home, but one thing was crystal clear. This wasn't just any ordinary break-in. The fact that Kayla was present changed everything. I pressed the accelerator to the floor and raced toward my house. When I arrived, my tires screeched as I slammed the brakes. My pulse hammered as I flung the car door open and charged toward the driveway. There, standing right in front of me, was a man, tall, slim, with an arrogant posture, directing two other men who were carrying my furniture toward the back of a moving truck. "Hey, stop what you're doing!" I shouted, marching straight toward him. The man barely acknowledged me, then muttered dismissively, "Mind your own damn business." That was the breaking point. Before I could think twice, my fist crashed into his jaw, sending him tumbling to the ground. He let out a sharp grunt as he hit the pavement, but I wasn't finished. I jumped on him, my fists flying as rage took over, pounding him into the dirt. "You think you can rob me?" I snarled, landing another blow. "In broad daylight?" Another punch connected. He groaned, trying to protect his face, but I wasn't about to ease up. With one hand, I grabbed my phone and dialed 911, barely controlling my breathing as I spoke. "There's a man stealing from my property. I've restrained him." The dispatcher's voice remained calm but firm. "Sir, I need you to go inside your home and secure the door. Officers are en route." I let out a bitter laugh. "I can handle myself." Suddenly a scream pierced the air. "Aaron, what the hell are you doing?" I turned my head and saw Kayla rushing toward us, her face twisted in shock. She dropped to her knees beside the man, frantically examining his face, her hands shaking as she touched his bruised jaw. "Why did you attack him?" she screamed at me, her voice filled with outrage. I blinked, momentarily confused by her reaction. "Do you know this person?" She snapped her head up, eyes blazing. "Yes, he's Walter, my boyfriend." A cold shockwave crashed over me. I felt the air leave my lungs. "What?" That was all I managed before I drove my foot straight into his groin, making him curl up like a wounded insect. "You're my wife," I spat, my voice trembling with fury. "And you have a damn boyfriend?" I kicked him again, watching him writhe in agony. Kayla shrieked, "Stop it, Aaron, stop!" But I wasn't done. I turned toward the moving truck, my mind racing. "Why is this moving vehicle even here?" I demanded. The man groaned, still clutching himself. I didn't like his silence, so I kicked him a third time just to make my point clear. Out of the corner of my eye, I noticed the two guys from the moving company standing near their truck, arms crossed, amused grins on their faces as they watched the chaos unfold. I guess they were enjoying the entertainment. If I were in their position, I'd probably be entertained as well. The wail of sirens filled the air, and within moments, 2 police cars pulled up in front of the house. Officers stepped out, hands resting on their holsters as they assessed the scene. Me standing over a beaten man, Kayla crouched beside him, and the movers watching idly like spectators at a boxing match. One officer, a tall, broad-shouldered man with a stern expression, quickly approached me, placing a firm hand on my chest to separate me from the man on the ground. "Step back, sir," he commanded. I clenched my fists but complied, taking a step back while still breathing heavily. "I'm the one who called you," I said, frustration lacing my voice. The officer raised an eyebrow. "Is that so?" "Yes," I snapped. "I received a call from my neighbor saying some guys were loading my furniture into a van. I rushed home and found this guy." I gestured toward the groaning man still curled up on the pavement. Directing them, the officer turned to look at Kayla, who was still on her knees, gently cradling the man's face. Her eyes were red with anger and something else, maybe guilt. "Ma'am, what's happening here?" the officer asked. Kayla lifted her head, wiping her eyes before responding. "This man is Walter Anderson," she said, her voice wavering but determined. "He's my boyfriend." My stomach twisted at those words, even though I'd already heard them. Hearing her say it again so plainly and unapologetically felt like another punch to the gut. "I'm leaving Aaron," she continued, her voice now cold and void of emotion, "and I'm taking my half of the furniture." The officer turned his gaze back to me, studying my expression. I must have looked as stunned as I felt. My mind reeled. 17 years of marriage, a home, a family, all reduced to this. A moving van and a smug bastard named Walter on my driveway. The officer cleared his throat. "Mrs. Thompson," he said, his voice calm but firm, "did you inform your husband that you were leaving?" Kayla hesitated, then with a stubborn tilt of her chin, she said, "No." The officer let out a slow sigh, rubbing his temple. "Ma'am, I need you to understand something." He glanced at the moving van before turning back to her. "To take any of this furniture, you need to file for divorce first. After the judge orders the assets to be divided, both parties will have to sign a legal document listing the assets under each name." Kayla's face paled slightly. "What you're doing right now," the officer continued, his tone sharpening, "is illegal. If your husband decides to press charges, this will be classified as theft." Kayla gasped at the officer's words, her face flashing with shock and frustration. She turned to the 2 movers, her voice tight with urgency. "Put everything back." The men, still amused by the situation, shrugged and began carrying the furniture back inside. The officer crossed his arms and spoke, again his tone making it clear he was done entertaining any nonsense. "You can leave with your clothes. To keep this process smooth, I'll stay here and assist until you're gone." Kayla turned sharply toward him, eyes blazing. "My husband should leave," she snapped, glaring at me as though I was the problem. "I deserve to live here." I quickly shot back. "This house belongs to my mother, so she has no rights to this property." Kayla screamed back, "No, you need to leave. I deserve to live here." That was the final straw for the officer. His patience had clearly run out. "Ma'am, you just attempted to steal from your husband," he said, his voice dripping with irritation. "And now when you're being given a fair way to move out, you want to throw him out of his own home?" He scoffed and shook his head. "Well, let's see if your husband wants to file charges for theft." He turned to me, waiting for my response. Before I could speak, Kayla threw her hands up. "Fine, I'll get my stuff," she snapped before storming inside. I watched her go, my mind still struggling to process the fact that the woman I had spent 17 years with, the mother of my child, had been sneaking around with another man. and had planned to rob me blind before vanishing from my life. A few minutes passed before she reappeared with 2 large suitcases. As she made her way toward the door, I raised a hand. "Hold on," I said, turning to the officer. "I want her bags checked." Kayla froze, then turned slowly to face me, her mouth slightly open in disbelief. "Aaron, you have to humiliate me like this," she hissed. "Don't you trust me?" That was all it took. The 2 movers who had been quietly watching the drama unfold suddenly burst into loud laughter. Even the officers exchanged smirks, one of them shaking his head as if he couldn't believe what he was hearing. The officer in charge sighed. "Open the bags, ma'am," he said firmly. "Your husband has every right to check." With an angry glare, Kayla unzipped the first suitcase and stepped aside. I crouched down and started rummaging through it. At first it was just clothes, but then, nestled between her sweaters, I spotted my laptop and phone charger. I pulled them out and held them up. She let out a small sigh. "I need those." I let out a short, humorless laugh, shaking my head. "Get them from your lover," I said coldly. "He can take care of you now." Kayla had left. She had packed her things, taken her true love with her, and walked out of my life. Walter was still limping from the beating I had given him, which brought me some satisfaction, but that satisfaction was short-lived. The house was quiet now, eerily so, and the reality of what had just happened was beginning to sink in. Then the front door swung open. Judy walked in, her backpack slung over one shoulder, her brows furrowed as she took in the mess, the half-moved furniture, the suitcases that had been hastily unpacked, the mover's footprint still marking the floor. She set her bag down and looked at me. "Dad, what the hell happened here?" I exhaled, rubbing my temples. "Come sit down," I said, patting the couch beside me. She sat down, looking at me expectantly. I took a deep breath. "Your mother has decided to leave," I said evenly. "She's gone with her new lover." Judy blinked, then to my utter shock she shrugged and said, "Oh, you mean Walter?" I turned to her, my grip tightening around the whiskey glass in my hand. "Wait. You knew about him?" She gave me a look as if I was asking a stupid question. "Yeah," she said. "Mom told me about him. He's her first love, her one and only true love." I stared at her, trying to process what I had just heard. The words hit like a punch to the gut. I stood up, walked over to the bar, and poured myself a drink, my hand steady despite the storm raging inside me. Then I turned back, sitting down with the glass in my hand. "So," I said, my voice carefully controlled, "tell me more about this Walter." Judy leaned back, crossing her arms. "Mom always told me about him," she said casually. "He was her first love, and she never stopped loving him. She married you because, well, you were a good choice, a decent man." I let out a dry laugh, shaking my head. A good choice. That was all I had been. Not a partner, not someone she loved. Just a safe bet. I took a sip of my drink and looked at Judy. "So tell me, Judy, do you think your mother did the right thing by leaving me for Walter?" She didn't even hesitate. "Oh, yes," she said matter-of-factly. "You were just an arrangement. They were meant to be together. Walter only left her because he had to go abroad for his studies. Now he's back, and Mom deserves to be with him." I nodded slowly, swirling the whiskey in my glass. "Okay," I muttered. "Very interesting." I leaned back, exhaling through my nose as the weight of it all pressed down on me. "So," I said, more to myself than to her, "spending all these years with me as my wife, that was just a farce?" For the first time, Judy hesitated. There was a brief flicker of uncertainty in her eyes, but then, just as quickly, she shrugged again. "Not a farce," she corrected. "Just a stopgap arrangement." I took another sip of my whiskey, the warmth spreading through my chest, but it did nothing to dull the cold realization settling in my bones. I set the glass down, my fingers tapping against the side as I processed everything Judy had just said. "So," I began, "if Walter had never left your mother, She would have married him, and you would have been his daughter. That would have been the perfect scenario, right? Judy's lips curled into a small, dreamy smile. Yeah, she said without hesitation, just like a fairy tale romance. I let out a quiet chuckle, shaking my head. Interesting, I murmured, more to myself than to her. Then another thought hit me. If Judy had known, who else had been in on this? Who else knows about Walter? I asked, turning my gaze back to her. She barely even thought about it. Oh, Grandma. Kelly knows, she said casually. My eyes darkened slightly. Kelly? Your mother's mother? Yeah. I nodded. Oh, so she knows. What about Grandpa Greg, her husband? Judy shrugged. Well, he knows as well. I clenched my jaw, my fingers tightening around the glass for a brief moment before I forced myself to relax. And how long have you known about this? I asked. Judy leaned back against the couch, playing with a loose thread on her sweater. About 6 months, I guess. 6 months. My wife, my daughter, my in-laws, all of them had known, and not one of them had said a damn word to me. I nodded again, my mind working faster than my heart could catch up. Very interesting, I said softly. Then I stood up. Judy looked at me, curiosity flashing across her face. What are you going to do, Dad? She asked. I turned to her, a slow smile spreading across my lips. It wasn't warm, it wasn't kind. It was something else entirely. I'm going to give everyone exactly what they want. Judy's smile remained unwavering as she looked at me. Her expression, one of complete certainty. You've done good, Dad, she said, her voice carrying an eerie kind of approval. You gave Mom everything she deserved. Now, if she wants to be with her true love, don't stop her. I tilted my head slightly, observing my daughter with quiet amusement. There was no hesitation in her words, no guilt, no second-guessing, just a firm belief that her mother had done the right thing. I smiled back, slow and deliberate. Yes, dear, don't worry, I said, my tone smooth and reassuring. I have no intention of stopping your mother. I gave her everything she deserves. I paused, for a beat, watching her closely, and I will make sure she continues to get exactly that in the future. Something flickered in Judy's eyes, but she didn't say anything. I took a step closer and reached out, gently tucking a strand of her hair behind her ear. And as for you, my dear princess, I continued, my voice soft but firm, you will also get what you deserve. Her smile faltered for the briefest moment. I let the silence stretch between us before finally pulling away. Then, without another word, I grabbed my coat and walked out the door. I drove straight to my lawyer's office. By the time I arrived, I already knew exactly what I wanted. The receptionist greeted me with a polite smile, but as soon as I mentioned my name, she quickly directed me to my lawyer's office. Didn't expect to see you today, Aaron, Mr. Jeremy said, leaning back in his chair. What brings you in? I sat down, folding my hands in my lap. I need a divorce, I stated plainly, and I need it expedited. His eyebrows lifted slightly. I see, he said, sitting up straight. Anything specific you want out of this? I leaned forward. I want full control of my assets. I want her cut down to exactly what the law demands. Nothing more. No alimony, no generosity, no loopholes she can use later. If she thinks she deserves better, she can go ask Walter for it. Jeremy nodded slowly, considering my words. And custody? I smirked. Let her have Judy. They deserve each other. He raised an eyebrow but didn't question it. All right, he said, already jotting things down. I'll get the paperwork started and push for a quick resolution. Given the circumstances, this should move fast. Good, I said, standing up. Keep me updated. With that, I left and drove straight to the bank. The teller greeted me with a polite nod. How can I help you today, sir? I'd like to withdraw everything from my joint account, I said, sliding my ID across the counter. She tapped on her keyboard, her expression remaining neutral until she saw the balance. Her eyes flicked up to me, cautious. All of it, sir? All of it, I confirmed. Then I smirked. Actually, no. Leave $2. She hesitated, then nodded. A few minutes later, she slid a thick envelope of cash across the counter. Would you like this counted in front of you? No need, I said, tucking the envelope into my coat pocket. Next stop, my office. I parked in my usual spot, walked through the building like it was any other day, and went straight to HR. Hey, Aaron, the HR manager greeted me. Everything all right? Yeah, I said with a smile. I just need to update my 401k beneficiaries. Remove Kayla. She blinked. Oh, sure. We can process that right away. I signed the necessary forms, then moved on to the next task, calling my insurance company. Within minutes, Kayla was wiped off every policy I had, and finally, I called my mother. She answered on the second ring. Aaron, is everything okay? I took a deep breath, then exhaled slowly. Mom, I said, I think you should hear this from me first. My mother was silent for a moment after I finished explaining everything. Kayla's betrayal, Judy's reaction, the cold certainty in my daughter's words. Then, with a sigh, she finally spoke. Well, she said dryly, seems the apple didn't fall far from the tree. I let out a quiet chuckle. No, it didn't, I agreed. Then my smile turned sharper. But I intend to keep that apple on the tree. Mom didn't say anything, but I could hear her exhale over the phone. A mix of resignation and approval. She knew me well enough to understand that I wasn't going to let this slide. We spoke for a few more minutes before hanging up. The next day, Kayla was served. I knew exactly where she'd be. At her office, basking in whatever glow her affair with. Walter had given her. She had expected this, no doubt. She knew I wouldn't take this lying down. But knowing and experiencing are two very different things. At first, she was calm. I imagined she had expected the standard divorce terms, half of everything, a clean split, maybe some alimony to keep her comfortable. She probably thought I would be predictable. She thought wrong, because as she flipped through those documents, her expression changed. Her fingers trembled slightly as she turned the pages. And then, just like that, I saw it. The panic, the realization. She had nothing. The house? Not in my name. She had no claim to it. The furniture? Also, not hers. Alimony? Out of the question. Our salaries were nearly identical. All she was getting was child support. And that too for only 2 more years until Judy turned 18. She must have read the papers over and over again, hoping she had missed something, that there was some loophole she could exploit. But there was nothing. I had made sure of that. Not long after, my phone rang. I let it ring twice before answering, my voice calm. Hello? This is not fair, Kayla's voice came through, sharp and frantic. I'm supposed to get half of everything? That's how this works, Aaron. I leaned back in my chair, smiling to myself. Oh, I said, my tone light, almost amused. Yes, she snapped. I was your wife. I deserve half. I let a slow breath slip through my lips. Then, with deliberate patience, I replied, and I'm supposed to get half of yours. There was silence on the other end. I could almost picture the gears turning in her head, the realization sinking in. I smiled wider. Better we settle it in court. The day of the divorce hearing finally arrived. I walked into the courtroom with my lawyer Ron Jeremy, who, as always, looked smug and pleased with himself. A shark in a suit. He thrived in situations like these, and I had no doubt he was about to enjoy every moment of this. A few minutes later, Kayla arrived with her lawyer, Lana Rods. The moment Ron saw her, he licked his lips and muttered under his breath, I'm going to smash her. I turned to him, raising an eyebrow. Ditto, I said without thinking. Ron gave me a side glance before smirking. I meant in court, he clarified, though the twinkle in his eyes told me we both knew we meant the same thing. I felt a flicker of embarrassment, but the absurdity of the moment almost made me chuckle. Then the judge entered the courtroom, and all conversations came to a halt. Lana stood up first, her expression professional and composed as she addressed the judge. Your Honor, my client's husband has refused to pay her any alimony or offer her any settlement. We are demanding half of all his assets, as is rightfully hers under marital law. The judge barely had time to react before Ron stood up, smoothing out his suit as he spoke. Your Honor, my client's wife has also refused to give him half of her assets and has declined to pay any settlement. The judge frowned, shifting his gaze between us. What exactly are you saying? Ron took a few casual steps toward the bench. Well, Your Honor, they both make nearly identical salaries. I find myself at a bit of a crossroads. Should I be demanding alimony for my client or offering it? The judge looked at both Kayla and me, then exhaled sharply. If both parties make the same amount, then neither qualifies for alimony. Kayla tensed, her hands clenching into fists on the table, but before she could protest, Lana quickly jumped in. Your Honor, my client would also like to bring to your attention that Aaron emptied their joint account, leaving only $2. Ron didn't even flinch. In fact, he looked positively delighted. He stepped forward smoothly. That is exactly what my client's wife contributed to that account. There was a pause. The judge turned to Kayla, his expression expectant. Anything else? Lana hesitated before nodding. Yes, Your Honor. There is also the matter of child custody. Before she could say another word, Ron cut in smoothly, his voice as confident as ever. We have offered the other party full custody. My client does not wish for visitation, and we will continue to pay child support for the next 2 years until she turns 18. Judy gasped audibly, her voice cracking as she cried out, You cannot leave me, Dad. I am your daughter. I didn't turn back to look at her. My jaw tightened, my hands curled into fists under the table, but I kept my eyes forward. I had made my decision, and I needed to see it through. The judge, however, turned his attention to Judy. His expression softened as he gestured toward her. Would you like to say something? Please come forward. Judy hesitated for a moment before stepping up to the witness stand. She looked small, vulnerable. When she finally spoke, her voice wavered. I didn't know that my father didn't love me. Before she could continue, Ron stood up, adjusting his suit with calculated ease. Your Honor, may I ask the young lady a few questions? Lana immediately objected. Your Honor, she is just a child. The judge raised a hand to silence her. Let it be, he said. Proceed, Mr. Jeremy. Ron stepped toward Judy. Young lady, do you love your father? Judy sniffled, then nodded. Yes. Ron nodded back. Do you respect your father? Another sniffle. Yes. There was a beat of silence before Ron asked the next question. Why are your parents divorcing? Judy's lip trembled. Because my mother's ex has returned from Europe and now they want to be together, so she is leaving him. Ron tilted his head, slightly. So it means that your mother either never loved your father or she loved her ex more than your father. Judy opened her mouth, but no words came out. She stared at Ron, then at the floor, as silence filled the courtroom. Judy shifted uncomfortably, her tear-streaked face glancing between him and me. I still refused to turn toward her. My hands remained folded. This moment, this exact moment, was what I had been waiting for. So tell me, Judy, Ron continued, were you upset for your father losing his marriage? Judy hesitated. I saw her glance at me, searching for something in my face, but I didn't give her anything. She turned back to Ron, her lips trembling, then quietly she admitted, No, I was happy for my mother. Ron raised an eyebrow. Happy for your mother? Judy nodded, sniffling. Yes. Ron exhaled through his nose, rubbing his chin in exaggerated thought. I see. So, Judy, you didn't care how your father felt about all of this. You were fine with the divorce? She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. Yes. Mom was going to be with her true love. Ron let out a low whistle and shook his head. Wow. True love. He paced for a moment before stopping and looking Judy in the eyes. So, Judy, let me get this straight. You didn't care about your father's feelings. You asked him not to stop this divorce. You told him to just let your mother go. You expected him to lose his wife and move on because your mother deserved to be happy? Judy bit her lip, her breathing uneven. Yes, she whispered. Ron's expression hardened. He took a step closer, lowering his voice, making sure every word sank in. Then tell me, Judy, why should he care for you? Judy's silence was deafening. The courtroom, which had been filled with whispers and shifting glances, now felt like a vacuum. Every breath measured, every heartbeat audible. She stared at Ron, eyes wide, lips parted, as if the weight of his words had just knocked the air from her lungs. Ron, never one to hesitate, leaned slightly forward, his voice sharp but steady. Now let me ask you one final question, Judy. He let the moment stretch just long enough for the tension to mount. This is something you told your father, word for word. Let me quote him. Ron turned to me briefly, then back to her. If Walter had never left your mother, she would have married him and you would have been his daughter. That would have been the perfect scenario, right? He let the words hang in the air, then his eyes locked onto hers. Your reply was, yeah, just like a fairy tale romance. Judy inhaled sharply. Ron took a step closer, voice unwavering. Is that correct, Judy? She hesitated, but there was nowhere to run, nowhere to hide from the truth she had so easily spoken before. Yes, she finally admitted. Ron nodded as if that answer was all he needed, but he wasn't done. You wanted to be Walter's daughter. You wanted to abandon the father who stayed awake all night when you were suffering from a fever last year. The father who never missed a single recital, never missed a single parent-teacher meeting, never missed a single sports event? Judy squeezed her eyes shut as if trying to block out his words, but he continued, relentless. You wanted to abandon the same man who made sure you had your roller skates when he was still wearing the same 3 shirts to the office for the last 2 years. He shook his head, his voice almost incredulous. The same man who, right now, is giving you exactly what you want, to be a family with Walter and your mother. He let the silence settle once more, let the weight of it press against her. Then, with one final question, he delivered the blow. What is wrong with that? Judy broke down completely, sobbing uncontrollably as her shoulders shook. I'm sorry, Dad, she choked out between her tears. I wasn't thinking straight. Please don't abandon me. For the first time in that courtroom, I felt my composure slipping. My throat tightened, and my vision blurred for a second. I wanted to go to her, to hold her, to tell her that I would always be there, but I couldn't. I had to stay firm. I clenched my jaw and kept my posture rigid, forcing myself to hold back the storm brewing inside me. The judge, who had been watching the entire exchange with sharp eyes, finally exhaled and turned to Judy. That's enough, young lady, he said, his voice softer now. You may step down. Judy sniffled and wiped at her tear-streaked face as she walked back to her seat, her sobs quieter but still present. Then the judge turned his piercing gaze to Lana. Ms. Rhodes, he said, his tone carrying an edge of impatience. I believe Mr. Jeremy interrupted you earlier. You may continue. Lana stood up, her usual smugness plastered across her face. Thank you, Your Honor. She straightened her blazer and cleared her throat. My client and her fiancé do not want custody of the child. They are getting married and do not wish for the child to be in their presence. A stunned silence filled the courtroom. The judge's face turned an alarming shade of red. His eyes flicked toward Kayla, who was sitting stiffly, avoiding everyone's gaze. Judy, upon hearing those words, broke down even further. The sound of her crying filled the room, raw and painful, cutting through the silence like a blade. The judge rubbed his temples, looking completely exasperated. Then he turned to me. Mr. Taylor, he said, his voice dripping with frustration, you don't want custody. Your wife doesn't want custody. What are you two doing? Your arrogance and ego will destroy the life of this child. I exhaled slowly, gathering my thoughts before standing. Your Honor, my mother, Brenda Taylor, will take custody. I have already spoken to her, and she has agreed to take full responsibility for Judy. The judge studied me for a long moment before nodding. Without hesitation, he banged his gavel against the bench. The child will go under the custody of Mrs. Brenda Taylor, he declared. Both parents will be required to pay child support. He paused, and then continued. There is no need for alimony or settlements. The divorce is granted. The sound of the gavel hitting the wood echoed through the courtroom. Final and absolute. I turned to look at Ron, who had been watching the entire exchange with a bemused expression. He let out a small chuckle and leaned toward me. That, he whispered, grinning, was the fastest divorce in the history of mankind. After the court adjourned, I made my way to my mother. Judy was already there, sitting beside her, her head bowed, tears still streaming down her face.